Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. This is part 2 of a show with Tim DeLaBruere and Dana LaPlante. They're here to talk about issues facing the Abenaki. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
So yeah, last week it was very interesting. You laid out a bit about who the Abenaki people are and issues they're facing. So we'll start up by saying, all right, who are you, Tim?
Who am I?
Besides being an ant, because you don't like calling yourself Abenaki. You are a person with Abenaki descent. Is that how you kind of describe yourself?
Yeah, it's hard for me because I didn't grow up in the culture, but having cousins and friends and family there, I'm slowly starting to feel part of like the culture. And I still never was taught the language, didn't learn anything, but I think I'm proud of like my grandfather, his family, and what they've done. So what in my mind is a Abenaki person is probably something different than what someone else would feel, but there's definitely a sense of pride. But I'm just as proud of my French Canadian side of my dad's family. They've got a pretty cool history too. So yeah, I think that means something a little different for everybody. Even Dana would have a different answer to that.
Tim, I got to tell you mentioned your French Canadian side. When I think of DeLaBruere, automatically, for some reason, it comes to my head. You guys were probably right there with Thomas Edison with the electric light bulb, and you were repairing. Because when I think of DeLaBruere, I think of electricians, and it seems like DeLaBruere and electrician just go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting family. My grandfather Eugene told me he remembers driving up where the Von Trapps live. His family had farms up there before the Von Trapps came, but the road was so steep that their Model T had to go in reverse to get up the hill. Like they've got a pretty rich history too. And then Bushyville in Montreal was founded by our ancestor, who their names go back and forth, Bushy and DeLaBruere. So it's kind of neat to.
So when did your family become electricians though? Because it seems like.
And I think it was Gene. And his brother was an electrician, and then even Skip, my grandfather on my mom's side, was an electrician. So I've got electricians everywhere in my family.
Yep. And your father.
Yep.
And you.
Uncle Dave, Uncle Dave. Gate DeLaBruere. He was an electrician around. So.
Right. So, and Dana, how do you view yourself?
I share some of the same as Tim. We went to the reservation when we were, younger. We never had, that deep connection there like we're starting to form now.
Right.
It's almost, if you didn't go up there, you didn't have, those relatives didn't come to the States very often or none at all. So I wasn't raised in that culture every day. So I've picked up bits and pieces here and there, some stories from my grandfather. And that was the thing with my grandfather. Everybody knew that, he came from the reservation and his mother was born there and everything, but it wasn't, something that wasn't talked about every day. There was no, stories every single day. It was, maybe a visit on a weekend and, dinner time, maybe a story or something, but it wasn't, we weren't raised in the culture. And my mother's side of the family, they're English, and my grandmother's side, my other grandmother, they were Irish. So, there's a kind of a, mix mixed bag of ancestors, but in the last, few years, and I've been trying to be involved more with the reservation, and I've been up a couple of times. But and I guess that's in more of response to just seeing uh, the self-identified here grow in popularity, uh, and just the entitlements of things and how the state treats them, and it's not right. And um, it's been overdue for the people that are descendants of Abenakis, that's what we're trying to make right. And Tim's hit it right on the head with that stuff. And this has been going on with our, my father was very outspoken and trying to correct that years ago. And I mean, so is Tim. Tim's been involved with this, even longer than me. So,
and Tim's grandfather certainly has been outspoken.
I remember a time, Dana, when all of that generation, Gert, my grandfather, they used to meet up by the golf course and have meetings and talk about things, and they'd get together and like actually discuss these types of things. I think I went to about 3 or 4 of those meetings, but that was kind of nice to see them doing things.
Yeah. Too bad. Yeah, too bad they weren't recorded. But I did record Gert, and the interesting thing about Gert, she said, because she said she never, even though her mother was born on the reservation, she spent time on the reservation caring for her grandmother. She said it was something she didn't think about. She said, honestly, she said she never really thought about the Abenaki heritage until the 1970s, when all of a sudden people were coming out of the woodwork to say they were Abenaki. And she just said, I would go up there, take care of my mother. It wasn't that we were all running around with, dressed like something you see on a Hollywood movie. It was just who we were. And she said it never really dawned on her until at least the 1970s. And it was just who she was.
I think that's a great observation, because something similar happened to me. When I'd go up there, I was fascinated by the history. A lot of people wouldn't think about it, but the Rogers Rangers came from Vermont, went up there and destroyed the village. They murdered 200 people, looted all the churches, and there's these treasure hunting stories that they left all the gold and silver in the Northeast Kingdom. But when I would go up there, it just seemed like a group of, like a community. And I played hockey in Canada, and it wasn't really much different, East Angus, all these other communities that I'd go to. So I never really was shocked until you start seeing people or former senators with like Plains Indian headdresses on, pretending to be Abenaki, or, I always had war bonnets bought on eBay, but things that just didn't make sense. It became a circus, and it just kind of was strange, because that's not what you see when you go up to the reservation. You don't see that type of stuff. And that's kind of interesting to hear you say that that's how she had felt, because it's something similar was like that to me. I never saw that community as anything different until Vermont started, doing this.
Right. And I will say to any of the viewers or listeners is, you don't have to be Abenaki to go to the reservation. They are. I've been up there 2 or 3 times. This last time was my most in-depth time, where I've actually interviewed people, I met people, but they also have an outstanding first-class museum that is very, there's a small fee, but it's everything you want know that you can learn about, native culture. You can learn about Rogers Rangers, and I just found people so welcoming. And when you go there, it isn't like you're going to be. It isn't what you have now been programmed to think what a Native American group looks like.
Yeah, it's not far from the border, everybody. Like Scott says, they've got an open door. They're welcome. They're welcoming anybody to go in and see and learn from them. And Dana and I actually have, I don't know if it's a great aunt or a great grandmother who has baskets that are presented in that museum.
Yeah.
I believe Jeannie Brink, who was on the commission with me, was related to another person that has baskets in that museum. So Vermont has definitely historical, like, merging with the community at NEK. And even if you're a teacher or a legislator, reach out to them. They'll talk to you. You can have a different perspective on the Abenaki culture and history, but different in an important way. It's the historically known version of the culture. And they're very, like I said, they're very accepting and welcoming. And the self-identified groups have been taking advantage of that for 20, 30 years, going up there and learning about the culture. I think it's time Vermonters do the same thing.
Right. So, Paul Lehar, who recently died, who would have been your grandfather's generation, he was as outspoken. He was as outspoken on these issues as your grandfather, and he was proud of his Odanak card. But he did something in an older age. He wanted to learn the tradition, and because he said basket making. When you were making baskets, you weren't making them necessarily for fun. You were making it for business or use. And he said his mother made so many baskets when she was growing up, she didn't even want to talk about basket making because she made so many of them. So and once he retired, he learned to make baskets. Now I know, Tim, I don't know so much, Dana. I know, Tim, you are hands-on, like you're a bonsai master even. Has either one of you just attempted to follow and learn the traditions like basket making just to say you can do it?
I didn't. My mom went through a similar phase when I was in high school where she started making baskets, but I think that was pretty common. They had, not like the Tupperware salespeople, but they had people going around selling kits and teaching you how to make baskets. So my mom got into it, but I'm that's too tedious. That's factory work, like bead work. I could never do that. I think I have ADHD. My brain would be gone in like 10 minutes. Even with the trees, I got to really focus to make sure all the trees get watered. But yeah, no, I never did.
What about you, Dana? Have you done anything to try to reclaim? Well, I don't know if you reclaim, but maybe just learn a little bit hands-on learning about some part of your ancestry.
It's funny you asked that. I started. I've been wanting to try the basket thing. I don't know, like Tim said, I don't know if I can focus long enough to get it down or not. But I've also talked about making a homemade drum as well. I've been talking to a few people that have made them. So I'm in the process of trying one of those. Uh, I've gotten more into kind of the drawing and painting kind of thing. I've done more, uh, made more connections with that with you know different designs from ODNAC that they've used up there, uh, and stuff like that, and just drawing and painting a little more of those and kind of displaying them out more and but yeah, I'd like to learn how to make baskets though.
Yeah.
I'm not an artist, but I'm supporting artists. This year, I had somebody from Florida that's in the Bumswin make me a beaded thing for the Montreal Canadiens, and I've got a person in I think Ontario that I buy paintings from. So I try and support like Abenaki artists.
You know, your Abenaki family, if you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, you got some you got some pretty notable people. Isn't one of the Obomswins on the Canadian Supreme Court?
Her name is Michelle. But I think there's one letter that's different, and I don't know how that Obonsawin instead of an M. But I think her family was off reservation from that area or in Ontario.
Right.
There's we have yeah, I'm trying. There's a very famous documentarian, Alanis Obomsawin, who's done some huge film work up in Canada. If you ever want to look into her, I think she's in her 90s. She was on Vermont. She was on some of the big art councils here in Vermont. Yeah, there's quite a few. And Molly Obomsawin is a musician, and I think she's had some work in movies that have gotten Academy Award nominations. So, and I believe her father was a musician who used to play in a lot of the old time NEK bars that was up here.
Yeah, he
So
was.
Yeah,
Kathy McQuillan,
yeah,
who is the knower of all,
yeah.
first generation on Main Street being Farron's flower shop. And I say this with love for Kathy. In her days, she was she loved the dive bars of Newport, and that Molly's father performed in some of them as a musician.
Yep.
And she knew him.
Yep.
So what do you guys so you've been doing your own battles with making sure the Abenaki are represented in Vermont in your in your own ways. What do you see going on in the future?
So I took a step back because I didn't have a very pleasant experience as a state commissioner. You mentioned your relation was one of the ones who just bombarded everybody I worked with just nasty letters and emails, and the governor got them. I kind of felt like I had done my work and tried to stand up for what I felt was right. Now NEK is pushing really hard, and I'm slowly getting back involved in trying to support them. I think it's very important that Vermont hears from them. Also hear from us, but I think that the NEK is relentless right now. This isn't gonna go away. I think at some point, Scott, you had a wonderful idea where why couldn't they just bring somebody who supports the self-identified people on with you, have a discussion with them. They're very polite and respectful. You see these meetings that are broadcasted where there's one side yelling and making nasty comments to the other. I think those discussions need to happen. I think UVM is doing a very great job. I believe they brought some of their students up to the reservation and showed them, what goes on there. So I think just every article, every little bit of information we can get out there is key. And this is what I kept telling, the people at NEK. When I was in college trying to do research, there's nothing for information that I could find. But today, students can Google and see articles in the Vermont Digger, see these things, and then they can start thinking for themselves, like, maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe I can look into this a little further. So I think every bit of media attention they can get, they've been to the United Nations. I went to the United Nations before they did. Every little bit, it becomes part of that place where students can get real documentation. So I think NEK's not going to stop. They're going to keep coming to the universities, and every time they do, they get a wonderful reception. They're not hostile. They're not bullies. They're just standing up for themselves.
I'll tell you, I have a love-hate relationship with AI. But if you go to AI, you can find out that it isn't all, accurate at all. Like you type in, if you actually go to some of your hot button Abenaki topics, you will be surprised what you will find in about the lack of accuracy.
I learned that, Scott, when I was presenting at the University of Minnesota. I Googled myself to try to find those old articles because that was a long time ago. And there was like a 5-page blurb about everything I think about Abenaki people. And it just grabbed everything from every article. And I'm like, how in the heck can any of this be true? Like it just used articles and then said, this is what he supports. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think you quite understand what I support. But yeah, it's different today.
So Dana, what your views? Are you still moving forward? And I guess you learned some of this from, was it about being active, as in trying to correct people? Did you say you learned it from your father or grandfather?
I didn't learn a lot of it from my grandfather. He never, he didn't have a whole lot to say about it back then, because it wasn't as prominent as it is now. It's been, some years since he passed away, but, there's been additional groups that have formed, since then. And, but everything from my father, my father, always, uh, wanted to correct the record and make sure that it was carried on, that you know we weren't forgotten about, our culture wasn't made a mockery of sometimes, and that the truth be told. And I know that, and I find that hard even now. I've been in the state house several times, and elected officials, there's a couple on board, but there's a lot that are not, you know. And I'm not saying that, you know, you can't live like an Abenaki. If you want to, identify, in the culture and immerse yourself in the culture and live like that, you can live any way you'd like. But to claim to be, a descendant, and and receive, benefits and everything else, and that's just ridiculous. Um, so I'm always going to move forward with, um, you know, Vermont Vermont citizens that are that are Odanak. Even though we belong to Odanak, doesn't mean we should be excluded from the state.
So, what more would you guys like to talk about on this topic?
I think deep down, sometimes there has to be a discussion too on how descendants from Odanak are used to perpetuate what's going on in Vermont. For me, I don't know if Dana saw or you saw, Scott. They made this Vermont Abenaki curriculum that they want to put into the schools. But guess who they said was the inspiration behind creating it? Me. And they put my name without discussing anything with me. And they latch on to people that have that Watso last name, and that's a historical thing that's happened for many, many years. But to say that, we're going to latch on to a family, learn from them, use their name, but then they can't have a voice, they can't have any say in how Abenaki people are personified or looked at in Vermont. It just seems so strange. And that's why when Jacques says they're erasing us by replacing us, that's exactly what's happening, because there should be discussions in schools with Odanak. It shouldn't just be one-sided all the time. If the state really was interested in learning, it'd be a collaboration. And this is where I know Odanak isn't going to agree with my statement on that, but whether Vermont recognizes tribes, which it did or not, it's a fact. But why are we including historically known Abenaki people that have ties to Vermont history? Like, they should be included in these museum pieces, articles, or discussions in classes, and they're not. They're being excluded on purpose.
One thing following this discussion, and me being part of the original problem, as a writer, I found it really interesting that some museums have even done a hands-off thing on this whole discussion and allowed think, like they say, well, that isn't our job. This isn't our job. Like, wait a minute here. But if you're a museum that is going to record Vermont history and preserve, how can that not be your job? How, like to figure out things. At least that's my.
That was a huge part of the symposium in the University of Minnesota, and Native tribes and governments across the country are going to start combating that, and they're going to be combating universities that also teach books by people that don't have Indigenous backgrounds. And the way they're going to do that is stop sending their students to those universities and start boycotting schools that are perpetuating it. But they're also going to do that with like museums. They need historically known people to be part of both the university and the museum systems. But since the 70s, this wasn't ever a big problem. And like you said, I think you said it earlier today, it wasn't under their radar. They didn't. Now they're starting to see how big of a problem it is. So I think the nationwide Indigenous population is going to start getting together and having these symposiums. And if it's a university that allows certain things to happen, they're going to start not boycotting, but just not sending their students there, not allowing their stuff to be taught there. Like, I think that's another arm of the wave that's coming. And they're using Vermont as an example because Vermont made the biggest mistake in not allowing any type of proof to create tribes. Usually there's some sort of a process or something. Vermont decided they could identify them or recognize themselves. And in my view, that just means anybody with a Vermont license plate can pretend to be Native American. All you have to do is get a tribal card.
So we only have about 5 more minutes. So we've got to wrap it up here. So I'm going to give you both a couple minutes to share your final thoughts. So let's start with Dana. Dana, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
I mean, there's so much that falls under it. I think I want Vermonters to understand that there are Abenaki that live, born, raised in Vermont, reside in Vermont, that are truly Abenaki, and I want the state to correct the wrongs that they've done, and they continue to support self-identified groups. You can't use that enough that they are erasing us. And I am glad that ODNAC is moving forward with the campaign they have to educate people.
Okay, Tim.
Oh, I just want Vermonters to know that there's no Vermont Abenaki, there's no Canadian Abenaki. There's the Abenaki people. Whether you split that in any other way, you can't use colonial terms because that just shows that they don't understand what it means to be an Indigenous population. You don't split them up by colonial terms. Secondly, Odanak is not a place full of bullies. They're not harassing anybody. They're standing up for their own culture. They are doing what should have been done 20 years ago. They're going to keep going, and they want the truth to be brought to Vermont, and they're going to continue to do it. I will invite everybody to go up to Odanak if you want to see the culture, if you want to see the museum. There's a powwow coming up. To see an actual powwow put on by a historically known Abenaki tribe isn't something that a lot of people in Vermont have ever seen, and you should do it. That's what needs to happen. If you're a teacher, invite them into your class to teach the kids their history, their stories. And support, Abenaki artists. You can go online, vet them. You can see whether they come from Odanak or Willinak, the two reservations. And just keep an open mind and just know that there's only one side that's harassing people and bullying people. The other side just wants the truth to be out, and they're friendly. They're nice people. And I just invite everybody to learn more and go up to Odanak and check it out.
Okay, well, we've got to wrap it up. I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great. And as usual, anytime I speak to you two, I actually learn a few things myself. So,
Oh, and Scott, you're hard on yourself for how you started out in this, but I remember you coming to how many commission meetings with me and my grandfather?
yeah.
You're the only legislator from my area that came. And that's how legislators learn. They open their ears and they come to meetings. And I remember being in that room with you
Yep.
half a dozen times. You were
Yep.
there when the commission first started. So thank you. And thank you for your journey in this, because I think you've landed in the right area. Maybe I'm talking out of its turn, but I think there should be more people like you interested in Vermont history and in righting this wrong.
And yeah, including when I was part of the wrong. So, okay.
Yeah, no, it's much appreciated, Scott, because yeah, you've been the only one that's, supported us and listened to us. So thank you.
All right. And thank you for both coming on. And
All right.
thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.